So, this 2 weeks challenge was titled Serenity, which was the topic that was written was, so let's take a step back from designing and relax with something of beauty. Take this reference and interpret it as you wish. Focus on lush colors, subtle light and edges. Note, make sure to have lost and found edges. And then I referenced this, which I will mute. And there was this watercolor painter, which was kind of walking through her thoughts in terms of like edge work, how one thing should fall behind into the other, and so on, which I think was a fitting reference or information due to the insane amount of leaves. Anyways, a lot of you guys, chipped in, which was cool. Fur did a sketch. Here's a like plan of attack of Gila. I don't know if she painted it. We'll scroll down. Atsuki with traditional stuff. Hey Zalin, how's it going? Provoking Perch. Don't know if Provoking Perch finished it. Firefox crash? No. That was Provoking Perch with traditional media. Quite nice. If anything, I would say it's too many different colors of different temperatures. Like the red with the cool purple, with the blue, with the green. Down here, those colors are harmonized better. In this section. Much better than up here, which is like one of the focal points, which makes it hard to read. ASCII, right. I will keep scrolling down. This is Super Grooblis. Crazy. I think it's a really cool interpretation of the topic. One of the sub challenges was lost and found edges. I think Super Groovy did a pretty. It was Super Groovy. Already my mind is like, who was it? Yeah, Super Groovy. I think the lost and found edges are pretty good. Like here we have a sharp edge versus softer edges, but I think one of the big issues is not knowing from Super Groovy, probably better point of view is what's the story, what's the narrative, and where should we look. Like if we let's do a test. I'm not gonna know I don't know what this is gonna look like, but let's flip it upside down. So obviously here is sharpness, and then there's lots and lots and lots of sharpness up here, and very much noodling over here, and here's a big section of soft, low contrast and somewhat soft edges, and then lots of contrast stuff happening here. So it makes things, and then over here it's very noisy and mixed with soft edges and lots of dots. The reason why I flipped it upside down is for momentarily we stop thinking of it as objects, right? We're just looking at it for what it is. Now we're brain thinking face and tree and stuff. So my suggestion would be to soften the contrast and edges in the background, and all these magical stuff you need to vary more deliberately and make a like visually clear hierarchy of these emitting particles. Think of it like a flame, like a flame that's burning. And if the flame is equally sized everywhere, it's not gonna look like that interesting, right? You gotta have a little bit of fire dissipation and all these things of particles flying and transitioning into lesser heat of the fire, and then at some point the smoke coming off the thing that's burning. The reason why I'm talking about fire is think of it like a distribution of size and shapes, and how we see it, because there's a natural balance that we as artists are having to try to emulate, right? And if there's no artistic balance or choosing or sense of taste or restraint in how we, let's say, add these particles, if they're all the same size and same sharpness, it's gonna look very boring. You know, as an artist, we have to decide like at where and how should these dots be. So the reason why I took fire, because it's very similar to what you've been trying to do here, and this kind of magic floating off her. You have to go in and choose where's a sharper edge, where's a softer edge. I think it's a good attempt at trying to have variety in edges. You should have just taken it one step further and gone a little bit deeper in the control and varying all these dots so it's not like a repeating brush, like a noise, like that. Like, yeah, it's good to get stuff down really fast, but even mine has subtle variety in it, right? And if I would overuse this, it would quickly become ugly to look at. So you gotta just try to work it more. Observe reality. Observe how embers fly off fire, for example, because if they get caught by wind, you know, and pushing particles, they collect more at certain point and dissipate a bit more the further the wind takes them, and you know, there's all these real world things you gotta consider. So I'd say for you, the feedback to you, I'd say it's a great start. Just think more about the focal point, how to balance the painting with lost and found edges. Some of edges that they blur out a bit too much, and it's just a soft, big blob of soft brush. While the idea is good, it requires a little bit more of work to make it read better. the problem is the variety of edge work becomes the opposite, where it's not all sharp and everything is just too soft. It's a matter of balance and how you like use it. Yeah, so try to work in a lot more in edge variety, so it's just not this just noise, right? And for the trees in the background, you can introduce some soft light to help indicate direction of the trees. And so also, for example, you can have a cool or a different hue of the light that hits the trees in bounce light to counteract the blue light from her magic or that magic. So then you can start pushing and pulling forms in perspective. That's that one. But overall, I think it's cool. Did Patito Patilla 17 finish that one? There's Provoking Perch. No. Next one is Patito Patillas. Or maybe on the forum. Let's see. There is Patos. No, it's the same. I think I think it's a really nice choice of colors on the dress. And the god rays, I think it's a little bit too much. Like if we squint, the god rays, the negative space between them becomes quite a high contrast, and we are moving our eyes to this direction, where we should go, you know, to her. So I think you should probably have the god rays quite subtle there, and then they can split and be more visible towards here. And one thing to help you guide your eyes over here as well, like you have a very strong light on her and very dark on the left, right, left, is you could lift up the background so that it becomes a bigger shape of light, so that she doesn't become so very, very high contrast, to help ease the contrast a bit. Hey, Spiritut. So that would be like the biggest thing for this one, that it's a bit too high contrast. You can't see it. I'll move the navigator out. But now you can start seeing. You should be able to start seeing how less of a big contrast it gets. And all I did was just make a lighter color layer, and I'm just lifting out some of the blacks. Because if you're gonna stray away from the reference and add these contrasts of god rays and you know, if you're gonna interpret the reference that way, that you want to alter it, you also need to understand at what point should you yourself stray away from being tied to the reference, where your imagination takes over and taste and choices. I can see at some points you've stayed true to the reference, and at some points you've added your imagination to it, which, you know, is fine. All I'm saying is that you just gotta be sure of at what point do you stray, and at what point do you look at the reference and understand what's in the reference that makes it work versus your interpretation of the reference, and where that might fail. And one of the reasons is, I'll show you. I'll load up the reference. So one of the reasons, for example, the reference works so well with all these leaves is that there's a natural, if we like squint or where is it there? Or if we do like squint, we can kind of start seeing the bigger groups of light and shadows, and how that helps direct the eye into the painting. It's like a pyramid lying down, like this. Shadows are going like that direction, and then, you know, the stairs up, and there's contrast within these groups, but there is major groups. So that's what I mean about with yours. Let me. That's the original. That your version, squint simulation, yeah. Yours is way too high contrast. But it does put her like in a pocket of light, which is cool. My version would just try to maintain that, but add mood and lost and found edges to it, so that it's not just all contrast to the max. You know, it's a matter of finding that contrast and layering it with more, so that you will still get that impact, but not so simplified and brutal. Because your version is great for like a split second. That sounds horrible, but I'll explain it. It's great for a split second because we get the impression of contrast. But then after that split second, when we actually look, there's nothing for us to engage with or fall into, right? In this, I'm not saying like look at master painting, but in this version there's huge differences. There's still the same contrast, but veiled, right? And we can start becoming lost in the painting, in the subtleties, and that's like the second glance. That's the next 10 seconds or however long time we want to devote to stay around in it. Hey, Ohms. So that's why, for example, your version with the high contrast, like we go in the center of the character, and then we go, oh, whoosh, we fly out of the painting, out to the corner. There's nothing that keeps us, you know. So in this version, we lift the contrast over there, so the contrast is over here now, but we still have that strong diagonal that pushes us in. Probably should, in a very, very subtle manner, also tone the skirt a little bit, maybe. so that the contrast isn't all at the thigh, but we can actually travel along that volume. Because without that adjustment, we stop at the butt, the hip. We want to have the subtlety to travel between the head and feet. That's my take on it. Hope it will help. Atskis. I don't know if this will actually help me in any way, because I'm not a color pencil painter drawer person. But let's have a look at what you did. Atski. Yeah. There's provoking perch with the Photoshop touch-ups, right? So with this one, I think it's really cool with how the leaves are fading into the painting, and the structure of how you drawn them. Like, we can clearly see that you altered the direction of the marks for us to kind of feel the lines, right? We feel the volumes a lot more. That being said, I think that's a great experiment on your end, and some worth exploring further from your end, because as I see it, there's a lot of lines going like that at the moment in your drawing, and I think like there's an artist I usually refer to sometimes. What's his name? Oh man, Andre. What's his name? Ryabovichev. Oh god damn it. Me and names. But what I wanted to say was I referred to him before on another stream, but you see how the lines. Oh yeah, names. You see the lines, they kind of arc and they follow, but then they also contradict, and they and in a very subtle way. I mean, this is not the best example of him, but you can see the structure is like a fan, and then lines that contradicts it to push us through the volumes of the drawing. I'll give you his Twitter if you want to dive into it. But here's also another good example. Like, he has vertical lines, but he slightly alters the direction to push ourselves into towards the head. And we can see that in like his setup. He sets up the focal point, right? We can clearly see the face area, and then blocks in the shadows, and then the kind of composition comes into play. He pushes the composition further, and then eventually we land here with carefully placed lines. Like, if you look at around his eyes, they are in a slight arc, and like he at the nose tip as well, he kind of feels the shape around it, and by those means, looking at yours, like, you're starting to figure that out. We can clearly see it by the hair and by the leaves and so on, but you're doing it a little bit like contradicting the flow of your own creation, right? You're getting stuck in definition rather than composition. Like, we can see that on the collar, we can see that on the belt, we can see that on some of the elements of the arm and at the top. But overall, the general idea of having those lines of how you make the marks is a really cool idea, and I would love to see you to further pursue that. Like up here, it works really well. Here, it works really well. Um, and at certain points with the color pencil, I know it's hard to do with color pencils and very smooth. Uh, but I would. This is of course easy to do with Photoshop, but I would try to soften some of the contrast at places where it doesn't need to be contrast in edges. You know, so that you work into the edges, um, both in contrast of edges and contrast of value. So you can start defining a little bit better where we should be looking. So for example, if I would make this a lot darker, like you have on the background, that will start changing up where we're looking through your drawing. And I feel that the leaves are lacking a little bit of that. It becomes like a two-dimensional pattern in a three-dimensional human standing there. So I would have tried to indicate depth a little bit more, and still pushing that idea of the leaves falling into the mass of the garden, but just be a little bit more like over here in the top right corner. It works really, really well. Probably just want to have her also not be so like cut out of the background. Have her a part of the background a little bit, even though, you know, she is lit and she obviously should stand out of the background. It wouldn't hurt to just soften that edge so that she's not defined everywhere around, so that you have elements of her becoming the background a little bit. Obviously not like a leaf turning into hair, but in terms of sharpness of edges and values. And there's some funky stuff with anatomy. If you look at the center line, her face is quite mushed. Hey, a pristine banana. Nickname. Fantastic nickname. And you know, a general idea how I like to do hair when drawing traditionally. And digitally is always do bigger groups of hair, so you get the general volume down. And of course this is a bit harder with color pencil because you have to do it the other way around, right? You can't go from brightness to darkness. You have to block out where the darker are and the lighter are and where the highlights are. So now digitally I'm taking shortcuts. I'm painting with whiter or brighter value on top, but you can do the same by just organizing your values from the beginning of when you're like painting hair. Is do it in first big blocks so that you can model the volumes of the hair and get the overall positioning correct. And then I'll try to explain it. Like if you're gonna, you know, draw the head and have hair, start drawing the, you know, obviously like the soft edges of the hair, the structure of it. Fantastic drawing master 2020. And then you start like thinking about the darkest areas, and you start constructing the general flow of it, and then start thinking about the major groups of the hair. Obviously, this is 1 minute example, and when you're drawing, and I would draw, deliberately trying my best, this would, I would put a lot more time into it. But then when you're starting to find a good rhythm, you're still not like doing the smaller things, the perfect little details. But when you're starting to get a good structure, you can then go in and carefully decide where there should be a darker, sharper line and a softer group of information, so that you can start dictating the rhythm of the hair and the flow of the hair, and how shiny it is, and so on. Rick, yeah, yeah. So if you look at your drawing, the hair is being not punished by it, but it becomes quite flat, and each strain is equally determined, and it becomes a mass of hair rather than we're reading the volumes of the hair. Zealand, yeah. So hopefully that makes sense in like the approach to the structure of the hair. I can see that you're kind of playing with it, but it looks more like an afterthought than an actual structural approach. But with those things in mind, I think you could have you have quite a nice drawing, and quite sweet, and it's I really like it. It feels like photo of a woman or a young woman you that would be involved in a love story, which is quite nice. It's far from demons and wizards, and it's quite subtle. So with that, it's a fantastic interpretation of the reference. Quite interesting to see. Like I said, the face have some anatomy issues, and light is quite flat on her face. I know it's really hard to get it right, but if we think about Andrei oh god damn it, Ryabovichev, the way he like plays around with structure, even in his paints and so on. Like in this face, there's a lot of subtleties, but the way he plays those lines indicate form, even though it's nothing a lot there. It's just basic marks, plop plop plop. And in yours, it has the same subtlety, but the structure of the construction of the lines in your face is a little bit undetermined and weak compared to the planes of the head and construction. Let me try to find one of my drawings, but this, for example, half an hour more studio colorophobia. This is just like a walkthrough of the 2-week challenge. Gatsky, yeah. So this one, this sketch of mine, obviously is just a quick little one, but you can see how I placed the lines, and I wanted to play with the idea of having a circular curves through the creature as I was drawing it. So it was deliberately placing the drawings, the lines, to indicate structure, but also having this swooping feel through all the lines. And it's not a big drawing, so just so you know, is the size of, uh, you know. But the idea is there, which I think your version is lacking a little bit. When you, but you're also playing around with it in the leaves and so on. I think you just got a little bit lost and scared of making mistakes. But overall, it's a really cool entry, and still impressive that you're going traditional. So here's provoking perch. It's the same feedback. Like the bottom part of the drawing has a pretty palette, while the upper part has the temperature of the paints are too wide. There's with gouache I would go more underpainting.
I feel like I should say something smart.
Cheers for the raid, man. Or host. Much appreciated. I'm doing kind of feedback session for a 2-week challenge I do on the Discord. So actually today is a good example of that. Today's warm-up was a skull. And if we look at provoking perch, was that the name? Provoking perch. I think what you gotta do is the same with the skull. Like set the tone, base tone. Can't raid? That's weird. I need to check that out. Why it does that? Thank you very much, Christopher Kant, for the raiding party. Wicked, wicked. Thanks all for the fantastic follows. Yeah, I do like a special lunch stream every second Monday for everyone contributing to the 2-week challenge. It's more or less like a communal homework challenge, so we can all work towards a new thing that we should learn together. Thanks everyone, and good night for those leaving, and thanks for all the follows. Right, so getting back to the point for provoking perch, like set a base tone and then start working in the values so I put it in grays, greens, white, grays, I said. Anyway, so I started just working the things in, and by doing that, by controlling the palette more, this is obviously digital, but it would be the same for gouache if I would do that, or with oil, or with acrylics. And then, because we can clearly see that in the way you've chosen the colors, they're too cold versus too warm versus cold, and it just becomes scattered and doesn't have harmony. And that's something I see is your weakest point, is harmonizing the palette. I think on her and the lower end is a lot more where it should be versus where the top part is. So think of that more of gamut range. I did some streams last year, season 2. Let me try to find it. Quickly. So season 2. Season 2, I think towards the beginning of season 2. Yeah, I've streamed a lot. Season 2, or was it end of season 1? No, here. Season 2, episode 60. Or 2055. Season 2, 55. I talk about gamut masks, and James... the realist painter. Guide to the realist painter. What's his name? Anyways, I talk about it on the stream, so go dig it out. I talking about gamut masks and how to have a consistent palette by limiting the palette and finding the cold and warms by harmony rather than going too wide in your palette choices, which you are suffering from. James Gurney, there we go, Atsuki. Thank you. Fantastic. So now here's Styx. I think this is Styx' first ever. And Styx made her into an elf. That's pretty dope. I think it's a really cool entry. So if we like do the squint test, Drone of Velvet, yeah, it's really cool. For all you new people, I'll go through it again. This is 2-week challenge number 25. It's been going on for quite some time now, and the challenge was to relax with something of beauty, and I posted this reference, and then you could freely interpret it as you wanted. And one of the videos I attached, what you should think about is having lost and found edges, which is a balance between blurred lines and defined lines in a painting, right? And some guidelines. And if you want to contribute to these, to Discord, it's underneath the stream. You can just click and do as you wish. Anyways. So you obviously strayed from the reference to some degree. But it's fine. Like I said, if we do the squint test, I think it actually makes the painting read better. Which then you gotta think, why does it make it read better than this version? And one of the reasons why this version reads better is because by blurring the lines, you're actually dissipating the contrast. You're lowering the contrast between the brush marks, and it makes it read better. I stumbled on this many years ago myself while doing speed paint, and what I used to do was I used to duplicate the painting, do motion blur like this, and then go to like overlay or something and go like, why is that so much better? Like, I don't understand why does it like makes it everything so much more interesting to look at. And it's the fact that it's the classic problem of a lot of beginners or painters that are caught up in their own process. Here's, for example, my version of the same 2-week challenge, right? And one thing that I made sure to focus, like one example on her arm, you see how I painted it red and then it turns to green, and the tone of the dress changes through the painting. Like we can zoom in, it's low res, but you can see I put pinks and stuff in there. One issue with her painting is, I don't know why I said hers. Styx painting is that there's lots of definition, and in an unnecessary fashion. Like, you can still have the same definition, but by lowering the contrast to where it's needed for the eye to flow around the painting, you'll dictate a lot better for the observer where they should what look. And by now, me lifting a lot of the darker shadows we are going there, right? And then we're going on the back of it. Hey, Concept Sam, how's it going? So by doing that little subtle change, like this, now we're jumping between brush stroke and brush stroke in each contrast because they are of equal sharpness and of equal contrast. They're all like up to 10, like slider to the right, you know. So by lifting some and letting some other define more, we can start having. It's gonna sound cheesy, but we're gonna start having a conversation with the viewer, right? The chance always when we are not controlling the sharpness of the lines, like having some lost and found edges, and by that, an easy example, like I'll just make it. Like you can see here, all the lines are of equal sharpness. If I would make a selection and paint that line super sharp, you see what that does to the painting. Obviously that line is not where it's supposed to be there. Hey, Concept Sam. Yeah, this is like a 2-week challenge, the wrap up of number 25. For 10 more minutes, then I have to get back to work. So obviously this is like slightly to the right sharpness, right? You can't go sharper than this. But if I then erase some of that out and remove or paint away where that like insane sharpness occurs and leave it where I absolutely want it, and work on like where the sharp edges should be, where it's like a leading edge versus a edge that can fall back into sharpness. The usual rule is any edge being hit by light is the sharpest edge, and any edge that is in shadow has a softer edge. So, for example, if you would soften the edge on her lower back and have a sharper in the front, and then go through the whole painting with that in mind, we would have a completely different impression of her sitting there than if we would just go, here's an edge, same contrast, here's an edge, same contrast, sharpness, and it would create this boring expression in how the painter does it. If you look at all really good painters, that doesn't matter which style, they always have a control of this aspect. Like where should the sharp line be, or a soft edge be, or increase in saturation. Yeah, so that's my version of it, and you can clearly see that I've been playing around with that aspect of sharp edge, soft edge, sharp edge, soft edge. I can dig out the higher resolution so to show how actually high res it was. It wasn't amazingly high res, but this was the 100%, and you can see where I feathered the edge a little bit with multiple different colors, and leaving it sharp, leaving it soft, where I want the eyes to go. Like the edge between her sleeve and arm is very, very lost, but when we look at it, the definition is still there, but it's not just like a systematic edge everywhere, the same approach to all edges. So when you're taking a step back and looking at where should you look, where do you want us as a traveler or through the painting go, So that's something you gotta think about. Sticks. Where are the reservation here? Like the hand is very defined. Bushes are not. So I would choose certain places, like hero assets, where you go look at these edges, and so we go into her, like direct the eye towards her, and then the same about her, like which edge is the hero, what do you think as a painter that it's important to look at, like is it the leg or is it the arm, hand? I mean, obviously you just spent a lot of time on the hand, so you could have worked on edges around the hand and leaves around the hand, because now the contrast between the hand and the leaves around is too much. The hand looks overworked because of it, because of you haven't worked on enough on the leaves. But then if you would have worked on the leaves just as much, there would have been like, oh, this is just a busy area. So you gotta find balance. Anyways, here's Zeolin. I must say, Zeolin, one of your best. I don't know what you've been eating, but can I have some? 1 second. Uh, but yeah, in this version though, I'd say you've taken all the feedback I've had to other people and applied it quite well. And I think if you've been listening in on the comments, you can probably see where the feedback will go. Yeah, MVP Zeolin for sure. But like the softness up in this corner is great, but it doesn't have a difference until we reach her. And we go around her edge, and then this just becomes noise. It's arbitrary. So by having again some of the hero assets or like hero shapes that helps dictate the story, you'll start you will start like layering in the focus and where we should lean back. But overall, I think you've done a fantastic job. The dress reads really well. She reads really well, and the hue color shifts and hue shifts in the stairs versus the leaves are beautiful. Just some better edge work in the filigree, and I think you have a winner. Yeah, it's they're just treated too equally. So for example, one thing that speed painters back in the days used to do was they used to do like a selection and then take a big brush and paint one side, then flip the selection and then paint the opposing edge. Oh, nice. And they would do that, like trying to dictate where we should be looking. So they would make a selection, post leaning back and looking at their sketch, right? And then go, oh yeah, like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. Probably needs something over here. And they would go like that, and then flip the selection and paint into it. Like the beauty of painting into the selection is that you can you get the edge definition for free, but the downside of it is that it's so insanely tight. Like it's a pixel perfect edge, so you got to go in and paint away, you know, the perfection and so on. But by just doing that, you'll get a better rhythm. But obviously this is just me, like painting with hand grenades. It's brutal. There's no fidelity in it. but that's one of the big issues I see with the surrounding area of her. I love some of the softness. You just need to have a better structure in it, better composition of edges and values. Let's move on. Angry Sausage, though. Zealin, you did a fantastic job. You're one of your best paintings. But this was a collaboration between Permia and Angry Sausage. I think it's a very beautiful painting. I don't find the need to comment on anything. I love the warm tones that they used. I think the door might have been a bit too vague, but the found and lost edges, like on her shoulder, versus her dress, versus her earrings and face, is beautiful. All these like textural elements and sharpness and softness, I think is a perfect example of. I think here it could be a bit sharper though, but anyways, that's all nitpicking. Perfect example of lost and found edges and interpretation of the Mind Waker. By the way, if you want to look at it yourself, just go to the Discord on 2-week challenge number 25, and he posted the original resolution there, which is this is the original resolution. So you can just take a spoon and eat it. Like one beautiful thing here, which shows skills, which you might look past, is the darkness of the leaves here are silhouetting the background and the highlights on top. And as we're transitioning over here, the script is flipped. The darkness of the leaves becomes the mass, and the definition of the leaves goes to the highlight. That transition is clear from someone understanding edge work and value work. And Angry Sausage and Permia just leaving it to do that on his own. But that conscious decision of adding that and painting into it is really clever. I think what they did, as far as I know, the Permia started the sketch, handed over to Angry Sausage Sausage painted, handed it over to Permia handed over to Sausage, and they flipped around like that, as far as but he wrote about it on the Discord. But yeah, beautiful work from Angry Sausage and Permia. Beautiful. Fur. Great work. The dress, the noise filter actually works quite nice. It adds a nice flow to it. Again, I think this left side is breaking the image a bit. The top right with the tonal shift going down the dress, that the highlight is muted down here and higher up here is very pretty. This section is just lower left is breaking the image. But if you listen to the feedback to all the others, you'll know what to do. Really good work. Arms, that's absolutely madness, and I absolutely love it. Here, one thing that I think ruins the image a little bit is the equal intensity of the highlights, that they're in the same arc. What you gotta do is group them more like you've done over here in this corner, but with the highlights as well, because now they're very compartmentalized and sectioned. You need a little bit of overarching mass together, and then have the individual leaves being separated by highlight, but you gotta have more of a blanket statement, and then someone within that, if that makes sense. It's the same with the bushes on the left. they're great, but themselves are a bit too localized, and they don't have an overarching structure that they rest on, and then they have individual separation of the values, but they need to read as a group. But it's an absolutely amazing interpretation, and I love how it looks like. It's fantastic. And here's Slumpen's zoom in on the face. I think that's very pretty. The values are a little bit it's the same if you listen to the idea of building up volumes with structure for, was it Zeolin with the hair? Like, you need to build a structure to let it come to fruition in the end. And you can see that you've started doing it with the face, but then in areas where you struggle, where you don't really have the confidence or the knowledge in how it's structured, we can start seeing you breaking in the seams. Sorry. And it shows. So just more structure, practice in structure, and like which end should have slightly lower volumes. Atsuki, yeah, it was you. Yeah, but overall, really cool. And I think we got maybe one more. By the way, I will post all of the submissions on this thread. No, I think that was all. Oh, Elfling Me. It's a great exploration. The dress is nice. The structure of her though is a little bit lost. Like, we don't understand the relationship between the masses of her, except the legs versus hip. There it reads really well. But soft and lost edges, found and lost edges are starting to be there, but more work is required. But great exploration. Well, it's not so much the actual behavior of plants, but a good example is let's take this one. Like this section up here. There's individual leaves, but when we look at it, we read it as a group, and we can see that the intensity of the lit parts are varied as they're turning in perspective. Or in this section, we can see the individual groups, but they act as a group in overall how the intensity of the contrast is of the highlight versus the mid-range versus the shadow. Like, we can get that a lot instantly, right? And if we look at your version, we don't see that interaction that clearly because they are isolated from each other too much. There's no like bridging values that carpets them into a group, and then each leaf then could start dictating their own direction. But because they all just go high contrast edge turn, like plop 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 plop, they read as individual structures rather than a mass with subforms in it. You see? And it goes here in the rock, it's getting better, but there's no definition really of a mass. We can see the form turning in the background there. But then there's this noise. But really good job. You're taking great progress. Like all of these down here, I would let them fall into shadow a bit, or mid-range. I save some just for definition, and then our brain will fill in the gaps which are there but not there, you know? Much like here. Or here. It's quite nice there. Anyways, that's the end of the feedback thread. I will put a new challenge. new challenge. So tonight it will come up. So let's raid Chorus. This stream will go up on the YouTube archive. Also post on the Discord and also post on the forum. Anyways, good effort everyone. Fantastic submissions. I think next 2 week challenge is going to be a design challenge. Design something. We'll see. Right, thanks to all the new people. Have a great one. Let's raid. Raid Kurus. Yeah, it was really cool entries, and I was really impressed by all the interpretations of the reference. For all the new people, it's a day. I do a daily stream. You can check the time underneath. But this was an extra stream in this time slot. But anyways, have a great one. Bye.